Hello there, and welcome. It's Friday, time for an anomaly, and this one is about a college class. When I was teaching college classes, I often taught freshman comp. And one of the freshman comp classes I had was full of what the military school referred to as preps. In other words, young people who were looking to become second lieutenants when they graduated from our junior college. So many of these people in this class were not just over 18, they were in their 20s. And they were there in order to strengthen their skills, academic skills, thinking skills, and composition skills, so that they could attend one of the academies. So we did deal with controversial subjects in that class, much more than I would have in a high school class. And one of the subjects that we brought up and discussed was nuclear energy and nuclear research. And this is a very difficult subject in many ways because I grew up in New Mexico. I was born 40 miles from Trinity site, all right? And if you know nuclear history, you know what Trinity site is. So as far as I'm concerned, my whole life has involved understanding the implications of nuclear power, nuclear weapons, and nuclear research. During the time that I was teaching this class, it was very soon after the Fukushima nuclear reactor failure. So for those who were unfamiliar with it, there was a tidal wave in Japan, and of course the Japanese have a name for their remarkable tidal waves, which is tsunami. So there was a tsunami, and it flooded the Fukushima power plants on Japan, and because of the inundation of the salt water and because people couldn't get back to them, eventually the containment system failed and the Fukushima plants failed, and there were meltdowns and there were explosions, and radiation was released into the air and into the sea. Now, I kept very close watch on this because, first of all, I'm very interested in tsunami. They're very interesting to me. I'm very interested in plate tectonics. I do and have studied geology. I'm not good at it, but I have studied it, and eventually I did get an A in geology, just not at New Mexico Tech. I had to go to New Mexico State and grow up a lot to do that. So I had been studying the Fukushima situation quite closely and studying the aftermath of it as well. Anyway, in the class there were a number of what we used to call coasties. Coasties were students prepping to become second lieutenants and enter the United States Coast Guard Academy. And it was a big group of coasties that year. And one of the coasties was interested in nuclear power. He obviously supported nuclear power because he asserted in the class that the Fukushima power plants did not fail, that it was not a true nuclear accident, and it was. And when he said that, I did not hold back. Now, when I'm working with young people, I am more careful about how I address when they get things wrong. Now, I don't know whether my former students would say that, but I tried to be more careful. When a student had the wrong idea, I tried to gently guide them away from the wrong idea or wrong information so that they were closer to correct information. But with adults, I feel more free to just say, no, that you're incorrect on that. And so this young man asserted that Fukushima, there was no failure of the reactors at Fukushima. And I had been studying it. I knew there was. That was unquestionable. And so when he made this assertion, I said, no, you're incorrect. And he made the assertion again. And I nailed him. I told him my sources. I told him what happened. I told him the dates that thing happened. I told him how many days it took before the lid blew off the first reactor at Fukushima that failed completely. And I discussed how long that area would have to be. As far as we know, that the area around those old power plants will never be inhabitable, just like the area around Chernobyl will not be inhabitable in foreseeable future. Okay? It's not 100 years down the line. It's not 200 years down the line. It's not 1,000 years down the line. It's 50,000 years down the line before radiation levels in those places reach a level where it will be safe for humans to live there and not contract cancer from the radiation that they experience. There it is. And what was interesting to me about this is usually in a class where I would directly correct a student in that way, whether it was an adult class or a young adult, an adolescent class, if I did a correction like that in that way, students would align with the student. But in this particular college class, none of his classmates aligned with him. They all looked at him and laughed. And I had never experienced that before. So at the end of class, I asked one student to stay behind that I trusted, and I asked him, what happened there? And he said, that guy will never admit he's wrong on anything, and you absolutely dismantled him. And I was like, oh. So I gathered from our conversation that this young man was insufferable in one way, and that was that he considered himself smarter and better than everybody else around him. And if anybody contradicted him, he just went ahead and said it again and said it louder. But with me as the colonel in the room, that was not an option. And so they found it satisfying to see him put in his place. Now, here's my question. Do you think that young man changed as he grew older? Did he learn from the experience of Colonel McCollum correcting him on his facts? I have no idea. I would be curious to find out if he's changed, but it wouldn't surprise me if he didn't. Because there's a certain person who I happen to know went to a military school and acts exactly that boorish and asinine all the time. I bet you can guess who I mean. That's it for today. I hope you have a delightful rest of the day, and I hope you see me again. You gorgeous people.